My name is Markus Birkhofer. I'm in charge of research, development and innovation at the AREVA group. I will be leading the session on how to innovate together, international cooperation, and we have a distinguished panel. I'm very happy to introduce each of the members. What we will do actually is I will hand over to the first panelist, and he will describe in about 10 minutes what the topic on international cooperation innovation is. And actually I would like to start with Sylvestre Pivet. Sylvestre Pivet is at the CEA, Director of Innovation and Support for the Nuclear Fleet. And actually, Sylvestre, I understand the CEA has been working for quite a while on a very innovative project, which is Astrid, which is preparing the future for Generation 4. So it would be very interesting if you could tell us something about Astrid and how it plays a role. What is actually the context of innovation for Astrid? And second, also understand that there is a lot of international cooperation around Astrid. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that also.
Thank you very much, Markus. And as we said when we prepared this panel, I think I will go on in French, and there is a translation, so I'm sorry, Dan, sorry, John. Donc, oui, Astrid est un sujet intéressant pour parler à la fois d'innovation et de coopération internationale, et j'ai fait le choix redoutable mais innovant de n'utiliser que ma voix et pour soutenir votre attention sans avoir de support visuel. Voilà, donc l'exemple d'Astrid pour illustrer les coopérations internationales donc, est intéressant. Astrid, en tant que réacteur à neutrons rapides, se comprend dans la perspective pour le long terme de réaliser la fermeture complète du cycle du combustible. Alors, il y a tout un volet cycle dans son développement, et puis il y a un volet réacteur. Le volet cycle, pour des raisons évidentes, est moins sujet à des coopérations internationales. Par contre, le volet réacteur l'ouvre de façon très large. Astrid est d'abord un réacteur dans lequel il y a beaucoup d'innovation. Innovation surtout pour finalement l'amener au niveau de sûreté auquel on attendra les réacteurs dans toute la perspective du siècle. Il y a de l'innovation technique pour cela. On trouve cela au niveau du cœur, on trouve cela au niveau des systèmes de sûreté pour assurer le contrôle du cœur, l'évacuation de la puissance résiduelle, évidemment, à la suite de Fukushima, où on cherche à avoir une indépendance aussi large que possible des sources électriques, même complètes, et de pouvoir utiliser uniquement l'air comme source froide avec un fonctionnement en convection naturelle. Un sujet très important quand on est sous sodium, c'est l'inspection en service avec des technologies qu'il faut développer, et la réparabilité aussi, le système de pompage, la gestion des accidents graves. On a l'objectif qu'en cas de fusion du cœur sur Astrid, il n'y ait pas à évacuer les populations autour, tout doit rester dans la cuve. Et puis, il y a une option qui est examinée, on verra bien si on la conserve, qui est celle d'avoir un système de conversion d'énergie à gaz, de façon à éliminer en pratique à ce niveau-là les éventuelles réactions entre le sodium et l'eau. Ça, c'est pour la partie technique de l'innovation. Il y a un autre point qui me semble intéressant de souligner dans le côté innovant du réacteur, c'est sa démarche de conception avec un fonctionnement, avec un certain nombre d'entreprises intervenant dans une relation de collaboration avec le CEA, au premier rang d'entre elles AREVA, mais un grand nombre d'autres entreprises, ce qui nous permet de travailler sur différents niveaux du système, y compris la question de la constructibilité, la question de l'aménagement du site, le génie civil, et on voit à quel point il est intéressant d'intégrer un génie civiliste dans la conception et de dialoguer entre la conception du génie civil et la conception des procédés. Je crois que ça, c'est nouveau. Et parmi les 14 partenaires industriels qu'il y a autour du CEA, on trouve un partenaire qui en fait en est plusieurs, qui est le Japon, et ça nous mène à sa dimension internationale. Dans la dimension internationale, je vais citer les différents cas qu'il y a, parce que je crois que ça montre aussi de quelle façon on peut fonctionner en collaboration internationale. Il y a différentes manières de décliner ça. Le Japon, qui travaille avec nous sur Astrid depuis 2014, participe à l'ingénierie et prend à sa charge aussi des actions de R&D, notamment dans le domaine des accidents graves. Donc on voit là un premier type de collaboration internationale autour d'Astrid qui est vraiment de participer au projet. Avec les États-Unis, avec le DOE, nous avons des relations qui sont déjà fortes et que nous souhaitons développer avec des actions de benchmark au niveau de la sûreté du cœur, et puis aussi avec des actions de R&D que nous avons le souhait de développer ensemble. Ça va être le cas, et certainement de façon croissante, avec le UK, pays avec lequel la France souhaite développer ses actions de R&D en partenariat. Et donc il y a un certain nombre de thèmes qui sont en instruction sur Astrid, notamment pour exploiter tout le trésor que représente ce qu'on appelle le trésor d'Unre, et puis d'autres sujets techniques. Avec la Russie, c'est un autre cas de figure. D'une part, nous avons avec eux une démarche plus prospective sur un éventuel réacteur, mais surtout, nous utilisons les capacités expérimentales qui existent en Russie en complément de celles que nous pouvons avoir en France. Avec l'Inde, un autre schéma. Là, ce sont à la fois des actions de R&D en commun, dans les limites de ce qui est possible avec l'Inde. Et puis, on voit autre chose aussi avec l'Inde, où on travaille avec eux sur une participation de leur part à la réalisation d'une installation expérimentale pour travailler sur les accidents graves. Donc là, on voit un autre modèle qui est celui où un pays vient investir avec nous dans des installations de R&D. Et puis enfin, il y a plusieurs axes de travaux de R&D avec différents pays européens, avec des domaines de l'instrumentation, des matériaux, de la modélisation, et qui impliquent des organismes en Suède, en Suisse, en Allemagne, en Italie, et puis avec des discussions qui sont en cours en Allemagne. Donc on voit ces différents cas de figure de R&D à l'international, collaboration forte, ce qui implique d'ailleurs des discussions de propriété intellectuelle qui sont toujours intéressantes, des benchmarks, de la coopération de R&D, des investissements partagés, et puis l'utilisation des installations de R&D.
Merci Sylvestre. Actually, I'll continue in English. I'll switch sometimes between French and English. Actually, it would be interesting to have also your perspective or the perspective of the CEA. We will, when we talk further about innovation in nuclear, we will hear about startups in the US which are looking at small and medium-sized reactors, at different types of technologies. What role does it play for you as research institute, and do you have discussions on that, for example, with the DOE or with NNL?
You mean startups?
Yes, in this. I mean, first, the technologies that they're exploring, and second, the approach as, let's say, as a vehicle to develop new technology.
Alors, pour l'instant, la vision que nous avons est que l'intérêt que va représenter les réacteurs à neutrons rapides se comprend dans une perspective de cycle fermé, ce qui implique une position forte des États. Ce sont avant tout des choix politiques, et pour l'instant, on est beaucoup dans des relations qui vont impliquer des organismes étatiques. Et donc, pour être franc, la voie start-up dans ce domaine-là nous semble pas nécessairement la plus, pour l'instant, celle qu'on a le plus explorée.
Okay, if there is any question from the room, you're free to raise your hand. Otherwise, I will just lead on to yes, please, and we will have anyway question and answer at the end.
So, Mr. Birkhofer, I have a question for you. I have here a letter. It's dated the 9th of April 2015. It's from a company called Moltex Energy in the UK, and it says, "Dear Mr. Birkhofer, Moltex Energy, with support from leading nuclear scientists at the University of Manchester, has developed a nuclear reactor concept which is intrinsically both safer and lower cost than any conventional reactor, and that they intend to license the patents underlying this reactor to a major nuclear industry corporation. It says that they will be happy to meet with you or your representatives. It has also been copied to Mr. Philippe Gnoche of AREVA,
Yep.
to Mr. Jean-Bernard Lévy of EDF, and to Mr. Philippe Torian of EDF. Why have you not replied to this letter?"
Well, you can be sure that the reply will come. It's actually something before we reply. Typically, we look into detail at well, what is behind the question, what is the company behind, who is the team, and so actually I'm aware we receive. It may sound strange, but we receive a couple of letters stating about breakthroughs in technologies, and so we carefully look at what is actually behind, and then we reply based on our understanding of what is behind. But we will come back. So if there is, we can come back on the topic. What I would like to do is lead over the ocean to to the US and actually better understand. John, if you could tell us a few things. John is actually Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Reactor Technologies in the Office of Nuclear Technology at the DOE. And I understand the DOE has launched relatively recently, I think probably last year, a new program on advanced reactor technology. So it would be very interesting to hear your perspective, the perspective of the DOE, of what is required in terms of innovation. What do you expect? The nuclear, what's the role of nuclear that it should fulfill in the country, and what innovation is required for that?
So there's been quite a bit of interest in advanced reactor technology in the US, really starting last summer and gradually increasing over the past 9 months. And so I just give you some insight into where we are, why we're doing it, and where we think we're going to go in the future. So at the COP21 meeting in Paris, Secretary Moniz was really very pro-nuclear, if you heard his speech. The US stood up and really made the connection between fighting carbon emissions and nuclear power, that it's absolutely needed. The US is committed to reducing our carbon emissions by 80%. This basically means we need to decarbonize the electrical production sector. That means by 2050 we have to either be getting our nuclear from renewables, hydro, nuclear, or if we use carbon, it's captured in sequestration. But if you look at the numbers are really challenging. So we have an energy information agency that makes projections out into the future. If we look at those projections, which is kind of, they did a 2010 number and 2035 number, and what we actually see is that in 2035, we're nowhere close to meeting the goal of 80%. In fact, we're basically flat at somewhere between 30 and 40% clean energy. So to get to 80% clean energy by 2050 is really going to mean a substantial change in the energy production market. And basically it means eliminating the carbon sources. And then here is John Kelly's projections or thoughts on what the future output might look like, with nuclear power doubling, and this is reinforced by some work done at NEA that looked at a worldwide doubling of nuclear probably being necessary to meet the less than 2 degrees C climate change goal. A tenfold increase in renewables and carbon capture and sequestration, going from basically nothing today to a rather significant part of our electrical production. All these numbers are daunting. I think the nuclear is achievable, but some things have to happen. The real question is, what's the mix need to be? So a doubling of nuclear means that the U.S. would go from something like 100 gigawatts 100 gigawatts installed to something like 200 gigawatts over the next 30 years or so. And the question is going to be, how does the current fleet behave, and then what's the new mix of reactor technology in the future? So on the bottom, you have the current fleet plotted, which shows, based on the license expiration date, when they would retire. Now the curve on the far left is with the original 40-year license. A majority of the plants, something like 80% in the US, have now successfully had their license extended to 60 years, and we expect more to follow suit. So we really expect the current fleet to move over to the red line. And we're currently putting together efforts to have life extension beyond 60 years, perhaps out to 80 years. With the first application being submitted in 2018. So there's a possibility that we'll be able to get more time, basically, to develop advanced nuclear technology. Now the mix in the future is probably still going to be dominated by light water reactors, whether they're advanced light water reactors or the small modular reactors that are entering into the licensing phase today. But the real question is, what's the role for Gen 4? And that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the talk. And what are the requirements Gen 4 are going to need to meet in order to be more competitive than light water technology? I think Gen 4 reactors in general are higher temperature, which can lead to higher efficiencies. They have, in some cases, higher power density, which means smaller, less capital intensive. So for these reasons, we think there is a good chance that Gen 4 technology can be better value, less expensive than light water. But this hasn't been proven, and a lot of work has to be done in this area. But this whole idea of curbing our carbon emissions is not just a US thing. Several nations have gotten together with this concept of mission innovation, with commitments being made to invest in clean energy technology and nuclear technologies specifically. And it involves not only governmental funding, but also funding from the private sector, which is becoming more and more interested in investing in clean energy. Now in the US, someone mentioned earlier about the 50 or so companies. I've just taken a quick snapshot here of the startup companies and some large companies that have been around for a while that are interested in we'll call Gen 4 or advanced reactor designs. It's the typical lines of reactors, with sodium fast reactor having several companies involved, TerraPower, General Electric, ARC. High temperature gas reactor, X-Energy, AREVA, TerraPower, Hybrid Energy, UltraSafe, etc. Molten salt seems to be the one that's the favorite of many startup companies today. You can debate the reasons, but it was largely never really developed to reactor scale in the 60s timeframe, and so I think there's an opportunity for intellectual property to be had in this area, which may be why the startups are investing in that. Westinghouse just recently announced that they're interested in the lead-fast reactor. There's been a company, Gen 4 Energy, that has been, Lake Chime in the U.S., and in the fast gas reactor, General Atomics is the company. Now, what are the current observations? And these are my observations. But we're clearly seeing major investments by the private sector in these advanced technologies. So most of these startup companies are being funded by venture capitalist funds. And I think they are very interested in clean energy and nuclear being part of that mix. But we do see a rather divergent focus of these technologies. Some are focused exclusively on uranium utilization, trying to get more energy out of the uranium. Many are thinking thorium is a fuel. Well, I think we need to correct that notion. Thorium itself is not a fuel, but the newsletters and et cetera that they put out imply that they think it's a fuel. Remote siting. So some of these startup companies are looking at the Arctic Circle as where they would deploy these reactors, where the competition would be diesel fuel. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that we're seeing interest in Canada in some of these technologies. And there are companies that are interested in the process heat. So this brings in not only the nuclear, but the chemical companies that may be interested in having reactors that are dual purpose. I think if we're going to really, though, focus on the goal of decarbonizing the electric sector, we have to focus these investments, because some of these ideas do not come with lower costs, and I think it's really a question of, for decarbonizing the electric sector, is getting market penetration of the Gen 4 systems up to this number, which is, if you look at my graph, something on the order of 50 gigawatts. That's quite interesting number. And so, at the same time, we have to be looking for these new technologies that can provide options that are better than advanced light water reactors on value. And the real question for us at DOE is, how do we harness that power of innovation, investment, et cetera, to make advanced reactor technology available in the time frame to meet our climate change commitments. So one of the things we've been doing already, and we'll continue to and expand on this, has been investing in innovation through a program we called Nuclear Energy Enabling Technologies. This is a set of cross-cutting technologies, which is probably where much of the innovation in the future is going to come from. Design will certainly play a role, but it's in new materials, advanced manufacturing, modeling and simulation, advanced instrumentation and control. It's through breakthroughs in those areas that then become a part of the overall nuclear system, where many of us believe that those are the areas that will really help drive the innovation in nuclear. And then just a few words on the GAIN initiative. GAIN stands for Gateway for Accelerating Innovation in Nuclear. It's always been known that DOE has laboratories that have nuclear facilities, reactors, hot cells, et cetera, but it's been very difficult for our industry to come in and use those facilities. And it's been especially difficult for small businesses to come in. And again, a lot of innovation will be driven by small business who can have more rapid turnaround of ideas and proof test them, either succeed or fail, and continue to move on. So GAIN is envisioned, it's being stood up right now, and it will evolve over time as really tackling these issues. First, providing a single point of contact or access to the DOE facilities, funding research opportunities with industry, so co-funding research to foster innovation, and work with the NRC to basically provide these new startup companies with the regulatory advice that they need to understand what it's going to take to license their technology eventually. And it's through this integration of the private industry, universities, government research, that we really hope to move forward advanced reactor technologies. This is just a snapshot of some of the facilities I spoke about at the Idaho lab, and they're also at Oak Ridge and other laboratories in the US, which I think have been very difficult to use in the past, and so we're hoping that through GAIN we will be able to have more industry participation at our facilities. And then I think as GAIN evolves, it has a concept of an innovation test bed. So not only will we be able to test fuels, materials in radiation environments, et cetera, but we really want to get to the point where we can be demonstrating new reactor technologies at a DOE site or at a commercial site, so be it. And this leads to the test bed concept, where in the early phase of development, there's basically proving the basic scientific principles, but over time you need to get to the demonstration. And the real key is, what's that first of a kind cost, and how do you lower that through more effective demonstration activities? We recently announced that we reached an agreement with a group of utilities to use a parcel of land, or potentially use a parcel of land at the Idaho National Laboratory. So this is the first step where we will have a land use agreement now where they can come in, and in that particular case they're looking at deploying a new scale model or new scale reactor at that site, and they're going to be submitting siting information to the regulator in the not too distant future. So we're moving down that path, and I think with that I will
very good.
be done.
Well, thank you, John. Actually, one question from my side. thinking back to the previous session on the role of the regulator and innovation, if I summarize very quickly, what I took from this session is that innovation from a regulatory perspective, unfortunately we didn't have the NRC at the table, but from the regulators that were present, sounded more like it's, well, innovation is driven by the industry, clearly. At the end, it's introducing risk, which needs to be evaluated and needs to be managed. What's your perspective, or what's the perspective of the NRC? How do you deal in this program with the regulator in introducing innovation?
So in the U.S., DOE and the NRC have a special relationship in some sense. We both were part of the Atomic Energy Commission, and then they split that in the mid-'70s. And when Congress decided to split us up, they instructed the NRC not to develop their own research capabilities, but use those of the Department of Energy. So we've, over time, have had continued interaction with our laboratories. I think the other thing is that as government agencies, we can enter into a memorandum of understanding to basically work in a coordinated fashion on particular issues of national interest. And certainly the climate and the climate policies that the President has announced get the attention of the NRC, and they're looking at what is their role going to be in the future. So their role in the future will likely be to review and evaluate these advanced technologies. They already did the large light water reactors. They're doing SMR preparations now, getting ready for that. And now they're starting to think about this Generation 4 and what they need to do. And we're working with them. We're going to provide them whatever technical advice we can, point them in the right direction. But I think in the end, the interactions with them will probably be on multiple ways. The first is on the regulatory framework, where we have in our laboratories lots of insight in so on sodium fast reactor, gas cooled reactor, et cetera, and we can provide that so that the framework evolves over time to be more efficient with advanced reactor technologies. We have already been working with them on the demonstration of new regulatory processes. So we're right in the middle of the SMR, and we eventually will expect to see advanced reactor regulatory process demonstrated. And then there's a knowledge management thing where the NRC has licensed advanced reactor technologies in the distant past. And so the key is, how do we bring forward the information from the 50s, the 60s, to the present day so that it can be used by the regulator. So that there's on a variety of planes, I will continue to work with them.
Okay, thank you. Any question from the room? Well, we have a microphone problem, but very good.
Thank you very much for this answer about the NRC and the regulatory framework. A question about the SMEs. So they are very active in the US in the nuclear domain. At some stage, it seems that designing and building a reactor, nuclear reactor, requires an immense amount of effort and resource and people. So can there really be a game changer in this field, or how do you envisage an eventual transition towards bigger companies afterwards? What is the model at the end?
So, you know, today we have advanced light water reactors available for building, and we're building those today. We're hoping that by 2025 we have operating small modular reactors, which will have gone through all the first-of-a-kind process, and so that technology will be available to the utilities to purchase going forward. For things in the Gen 4 class, we're looking at the early 2030s as the time frame when, again, because of the fall off of the current fleet, that's when the utilities will be making decisions on either light water or advanced if it's available. And so that's the time frame. Our current thinking is that we would need to have two concepts, and we'd have to take them through significant regulatory and demonstration activities in order for that technology to be ready to be procured by industry. And so that's the plan. How we accomplish that, we're currently developing our vision and strategy to do that, and we will be talking about that more in the not too distant future. But I will say that the industry itself is becoming very interested as well. So the Nuclear Energy Institute has formed a task force on advanced reactors. It's led by utility groups, so this is bringing the technology pull that we need, so it can't just be technology push, it has to have the pull side to it, and NEI is serving a valuable role in doing that. And the Electric Power Research Institute is launching an R&D program for advanced reactors, so that means that utilities will actually start to invest in advanced reactor technology. So I think these are all very positive developments. But in the end, we're going to have to move from the current level of investment, which is not enough to bring this technology to market.
Okay, with that, actually, I would like to come back over the Atlantic to the UK. Dan Mathers is at the National Nuclear Laboratory, business leader and accountable for commercial and research in the areas of reactor, nuclear physics and fuel. It would actually be very interesting, since the UK has probably, at least in Europe, definitely the most active nuclear development program, nuclear new build program. What is your perspective? What is the NNL perspective on innovation in this area? What are the topics that you're looking at, the technologies that you're expecting? And if you can elaborate a little bit on the need for, from your perspective, international collaboration for that.
Many thanks, Markus, for the introduction. Bonjour, everybody. I'll just start with some background from a UK perspective. So electricity provides for 20% of the energy consumption in the UK. As you can see from the graph, that's dominated by petroleum for transport, actually, for the transport sector, and then secondly by gas for domestic heating and for electricity. And the electricity is 20% of the total. As far as electricity is concerned, nuclear is your top colour there, and that supplies 20% of electricity generation in the UK. And as you can see, the electricity generation is dominated by a large wedge of gas and a large amount of coal down the bottom. You can see from that curve there's been an expansion of nuclear into the 90s, and then gradually a kind of flattening off and contraction latterly. The turn of the century saw us retire a fleet of Magnox reactors, and we're currently running a gas-cooled reactor fleet. That fleet is towards the end of its nominal life and is going through lifetime extension programs now to take us through into the back half of the 2020s. So it's a challenge to maintain that that capacity in electricity with that fleet, and hence the UK have embarked on a new build programme. I guess against that background, the UK also has a binding legal commitment to reduction of CO2 emissions by 2050. And solutions for that are low carbon generation of electricity, electrification of transport with low carbon sources, electrification supply for domestic heat and industrial heat. All these things can make a huge impact on reducing our CO2 emissions. Scenarios show that the electricity grid may grow from a current 85 gigawatt electric supply through to maybe a 300 gigawatt electric supply, but depending on the continued contribution of gas, how that falls away. Electric scenarios through nuclear generation are varied, and that's a sort of government graph of scenarios that could occur after sort of 2020s, when we have a new build fleet coming online, with the potential growth in nuclear going from below 10 gigawatt electric to up to 70 gigawatt electric by the 2050s. It's a huge challenge for the UK if that is to occur. Obviously, there are balances there on renewables, carbon capture storage and nuclear as far as the electric generation component. So just breaking that down, no graph is going to be in reality a straight line. I did a slightly, my version of that graph was kind of what may happen between now and the sort of 2030s, 2035, 2040s. So we have a new build component coming online in the UK. This is obviously an assumption, and we very much hope that that continues, with various reactors and 5 sites selected for that. Now, I've drawn a sort of second wave of new build here, which would require further sites to be selected, and deployment of advanced systems, question mark. Those advanced systems could complement Generation 3, Generation 3 plus systems that are being deployed in new build. The extent to which they could complement that is obviously a concern and an opportunity for us in nuclear to deliver really for continued new build beyond the sort of 16 gigawatt electric that large stations will get. I think the sort of background for me here, that second wave, you know, we have a legacy of sites in the UK that have deployed very small nuclear reactors, majority no bigger than 200 megawatts electric. So you have existing grid infrastructure on existing sites. You know, they are maybe the prime opportunities for deployment of new systems. So there is a sort of, you know, a tendency to think smaller for that second wave of new build. Although there are, you know, significant numbers of sites, some of which will no doubt bear a large nuclear fleet. To do that, lots of things are needed. I've termed this a government package, which would be required before a second wave starts build. If we were to start that site works around about the time that Hinkley C goes on the bars, you're looking at underpinning that with a large package of siting policy, licensing, design assessments, contract for difference negotiations, permitting and planning permissions, a large amount of things that need to be done before that time. So there are many things to consider for new nuclear deployment. I've picked up on a few that I think are key. This is my view. I think public perception for me is number one. It'll drive siting policy in the UK beyond new build. You know, if we are to retain nuclear licensed sites on current licensed sites, then public perception is key. Economics is also key. You know, there are not a lot of utilities around, and you know, to finance these large programs is a challenge, as we know. So that is, I'll put that as second. Safety is somewhat of a kind of given in my plan. You need a safe system to deploy. There are a lot of caveats in there, and I've sat and listened to a few sessions today about the safety concern, regulatory issues for advanced systems. And I've mentioned the government package. These factors, additional factors such as reliability, sustainability, proliferation, physical protection, will all come into play, and I think primarily from a public perception point of view. So, of all OECD countries, I think the UK is seen as generally supportive of nuclear power. This is the result of a Mori poll in the UK on public opinion, and that gives you the figures on the percentages of support for nuclear power. Obviously, there's considerable opposition still there, although that's balanced by a sector of population that are unsure, and some don't care what happens. But if you look under the skin of that, the Mori poll also indicated where the concerns were about the risks associated with nuclear power, and these are not to be underestimated. So a large amount of the innovative work in the UK currently is focused on the existing fleet, lifetime extension, but also waste management of decommissioning of a legacy fleet and legacy material. And I think maybe that reflects the number 1 and 2 concerns there of overground and underground storage risk of materials. That overground storage risk is specifically related to spent fuel. Underground risk moves us towards disposal concerns. And then thirdly, the concern about accident risk, which brings us back to the need to deploy and ensure we have safe systems. Economics was my second point, and lifetime costs for conventional plants do need to be minimised. They break down into capital investment, operational maintenance costs, fuel costs, decommissioning costs, in that order of relevant size. But capital investment is dominated by upfront capital, including the cost of finance. And I think innovative approaches need to really address that upfront. We do need to lower these finance costs through lower construction, shorter construction times, perhaps introducing self-financing models, bringing new modules on site quicker. So what are our options? John articulated very well the many advanced options that are being discussed in the States at the minute, and also over the Atlantic in the UK as well. There are obviously many claims for some of these systems, both Gen 3 and Gen 4, for advances in safety, reliability, proliferation, physical protection. And, you need to weigh up the proven design issues versus the new design opportunities, I think, considering the feasibility, substantiation of claims and concepts, technical maturity, technology readiness levels, technology investment, and key, John pointed out research and materials. I think that is a key aspect of, or maybe a key barrier to deployment of new systems is the low technology readiness of some materials that are necessary to deploy some of these systems. So advanced systems that are being considered, integral PWRs, high temperature gas reactors, fast reactors, molten salts reactors, thorium fuel-based systems, or maybe like John's point, I should say uranium fuel-based systems, caveat thorium. But I have SMRs there, small modular reactors. Actually, you can have small fast reactors, small molten salt reactors, small integral PWRs. I think SMRs are identified by their size, perhaps by their claimed modularity, ability to manufacture a greater number of the components in factory, more of a plug-and-play approach to deployment of nuclear to reduce construction time, but they still cross the families of reactor types, and there's some examples there. So I think it's important that we consider where we are in the UK. It's hard to see, given the UK's engagement in international collaboration, or lack of over the last decade or so, that the UK can jump into design, development and deployment of an advanced reactor. So a proposal by an independent body, nuclear industry innovation research body, has proposed a 5-year R&D programme to reinvigorate UK skills, provide us with R&D opportunities for collaboration in international programmes, to ensure we have infrastructure in the UK capable of supporting nuclear R&D. And these programme areas outlined here cut across these reactor designs. The design work here looks at systems and components. It looks at our ability to simulate materials, simulate the working components in reactors, look at in-service considerations, deployment of remote technologies, potentially look at the recycling of fuel through doing some underpinning research in both aqueous and pyroprocessing, and look at future fuels. So there's very much a sort of cross-cutting R&D programme that is being recommended to government right now, and also recently announced funding has been announced being made available to the UK for such a programme. So that's really good news and encouraging for us in the sector. Specifically, the UK aims also to maybe give some support to international collaboration in small modular reactors through a competition to identify best value SMR design for the UK. And there have also been some recommendations by NIRAB to on how the government may look at differentiating between those candidate designs. And there's a list here of questions that, from a UK perspective, you know, what may help differentiate between these designs. So I'll perhaps leave you with that list there to ponder. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. You can applaud if you want. Okay, in the interest of time, so that we have a little time for discussion at the end, I'll hand straight over to Marc Deffrennes. Marc is at the Nuclear Development Division for the Initiative 2050 at the NEA, and has actually the NEA has a very, to my mind, very innovative or disruptive view, maybe we could even say, on what nuclear technology should look like in 2050. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you, Markus. Not sure it will be disruptive at this stage. We have to see what will come out of these initiative, but I'm certainly very pleased to give you a presentation on at least the state of play of that initiative, NI 2050, which stands for Nuclear Innovation 2050. This panel here was very much on the issue of international cooperation, international partnerships, and as you know very well, most of you are certainly very familiar with that. The NEA is exactly that. It's exactly one of the main mandate and purposes of the Nuclear Energy Agency. It is to offer a platform for member countries, but also for stakeholders, be it for industry, be it for research organization, to come together, to discuss together, and to cooperate. So it's really all related to the promotion of international collaboration. For that we have a structure, a kind of formal structure with different committees working on science, working on safety, working on radiation, waste management. We have a legal committee also, and the committee for which I'm working is the Committee on Nuclear Development. One thing which is noticeable in these NI 2050 initiative, and this is very, very much pushed by the Director General of the agency, who is now William Magwood from the US, is very, very pushy for ensuring that this initiative is horizontal, is cross-cutting inside of the NEA, involving the different committees and the different divisions. And in particular, we are working together in the development committee, together with safety, with radiation waste management, and certainly for sure also with the science people. Now, in addition to the formal structure in the NEA, since we talk about international collaboration frameworks, we also have the mechanism of the joint projects, which is then a kind of ad hoc mechanism which is offering the pulling together of interested parties, interested member states, not all member countries of the NEA, but some of them, to come together and to work together on a certain number of issues of importance. And you have there on the screen a number of items which are covered by these joint projects. In addition to that, last but not least, we are also serving as Secretariat of international fora, international frameworks of collaboration, which are for sure independent from us, but we serve in terms of Secretariat support. And one of them in particular, which is also very close to the heart of John Kelly here, is the Generation 4 International Forum, so the GIF. We also serve as Secretariat for MDEP, and that was mentioned in the previous session, and also more recently for IFNEC. Now, going to the Nuclear Innovation 2050 initiative, the kind of context, background for that initiative is, and that was already presented many times with the other speakers here, is since we talk about 2050, it is the low carbon future, the low carbon energy perspective underlying these work. The context document, the background document for the initiative is the technology roadmap, the nuclear energy technology roadmap, which was issued 1 year ago in February 2015, jointly, and this is important, jointly not only by the NEA, but also with the IEA, the International Energy Agency. So this document is covered both by the two agencies of the OECD. And you see the little circle there in the bottom of it. For such a document, there are scenarios, energy scenarios, and they were already flagged by John Kelly also in his presentation. And the scenarios which are used to underline the development of the vision for the technology are the ETPs, the energy technology perspective of the IEA. And what I would like to do with a very few slides is just give you in a nutshell, a vision of these scenario. In this slide, you can see the reduction which will be needed in terms of the CO2 production by the electricity sector between today and 2050. If we want to go from a kind of business as usual 6 degrees centigrade scenario in 2050 to the 2 degrees centigrade, which is also now, which is coming out of the COP21. And basically this confirms that if we want to go towards this 2 degrees centigrade scenario, we need to reach a nearly zero carbon power sector in 2050. And this can then be also seen on this graph where when we say zero CO2 power sector in 2050, it's very, very minimal. It's basically a reduction by a factor of more than 10, 12 to 13 compared to the situation today and the situation of the 6 degree scenario. We are today around 500 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour. We should go to less than 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour in 2050. So that is the challenge in front of us, and you can also see how that influences the contribution of the different electricity production means into the electricity production of that time. Noting that, in addition to that, there is also an increase in terms of the electricity consumption, production consumption over time between today and what is expected in 2050. We go to much more electricity, basically going to doubling the amount of electricity consumed in the world from 20,000 terawatt hour today to something around more than 40,000 terawatt hours per year in 2050. Again, there you can see also with the different colors the contribution of the different sectors in the production of electricity, and in the middle of it you have the blue, light blue, which is the nuclear contribution, which is increasing over time, worldwide speaking. And here you have this same evolution. The black line on the top represent the fraction of electricity coming from nuclear over time, worldwide speaking. Today we are at 11% of electricity coming from nuclear, and going to the 2DS scenario, 2 degrees centigrade scenario, we should be at 17% in 2050. So we have an increase in the fraction of nuclear generation in the electricity over time. Below that, you have what it means then in terms of the necessary capacity, installed capacity to produce these nuclear generated electricity, going from 400 gigawatt more or less today to more than 900 gigawatt in 2050, which is more than doubling the capacity that we have today. And you have then also the distribution for the different main regions of the world. And I must say, John, surprisingly, on this graph at least, the US stays basically constant over time. So in 2050, it's still about 100 gigawatts. So I hope that you are right and that you will go to doubling the nuclear capacity in the States in 2050. Okay, maybe the IEA has to have to revise their assumptions into their analysis. Now, this is only about electricity. We should not forget the other potential for nuclear energy, which is also the production of heat, the production of cogeneration, and this is a completely new field where development, innovation may have to come in. And this then leads me to the Nuclear Innovation 2050 initiative, which is basically, if we have this challenge in front of us, if we want nuclear energy to play a role, a major role, both for electricity and beyond electricity, in 2050, something needs to be done in terms of research, development, demonstration, and innovation. And basically, the underlying reason of this initiative in the NEA is to try to provide answers to what technology will be needed in the coming decades to meet the growing demand, to align with the policy goals that I just mentioned, what research and development is needed to make these technologies available, and is the global community, including the public sector and the private sector, doing the R&D needed to prepare for the future, and what can be done better and how can we do better and certainly also more effectively over time to ensure this major role nuclear power may play, nuclear energy may play into the future. In order to answer to these questions, we have launched this initiative, which is organized along 3 steps. The first step is the first box you have, blue box you have on the top, which is a survey. A survey, as usual in international organizations, we like this type of questionnaire that we send to the member countries. What we try to do there is to collect information to have a picture of the state of play of today of nuclear fission research and development in the member countries. We have the impression that today the effort is, in a certain number of countries at least, rather limited or decreasing. It has been decreasing over time, and we would like to have a good picture of the situation, both in terms of programs, in terms of the scope of the content, in terms of the financing also, which is provided for the research in the nuclear field as of today. And then in parallel to that, we have a second phase, which has started already, which we call the road mapping, which is more a kind of top-down process through which, by calling up an advisory panel and experts, working together, brainstorming together, we would like to have a number of major priorities, very important domains, areas of action for research, development, and demonstration from their perspective, which needs to be realized, again, to put nuclear into the perspective on the medium to longer term vision. And this is more than a kind of top-down approach. At a point in time, later in the process, we will then compare what comes out of the situation today and what are the visions of the important things, including infrastructures, which will be needed in the coming 1-2 decades from now. And from their comparison, then we should be able to derive a certain number of important gaps. And this will be then the outcome somewhere in the course of the beginning of next year. That will be the outcome of the reflection process of this initiative, which will then open the floor, but then we'll put that on the table of the member countries, and it will open the floor for the member countries to discuss together and to see where cooperation, international cooperation, might be useful in order to foster the implementation, the realization of these major gaps. We will see then what is possible, and clearly going back then also to my NEA hat, the NEA framework might be a way through which such collaboration frameworks may be further supported. But that's clearly not the first goal at this stage. At this stage, we want to have a picture and to offer an opportunity to member countries and the stakeholders to discuss about potential cooperation in order to render the implementation more effective, or even in certain cases possible, because for sure all that is related then to major financing also. This is a general objective of the initiative as it was defined by the advisory panel in January this year. I just want to flag that the advisory panel noticeably is chaired by a UK person from the UK-NNL, Fiona Rayman, and it's not a surprise. The UK, we have just learned about it also, is very active in reactivating, redynamizing its research and development capacities, vision, and perspectives. This is the scope of the really the ongoing process as it is today. I have running in Boulogne, in the NEA, expert groups meetings just now. We have had expert groups meeting running 2 weeks ago. We'll have expert groups meeting running in 3 weeks from now, also in the NEA. And this is mainly the scope of and the domains which are covered by the initiative. It's not very surprising. We're covering the issues of reactors, both the existing reactors, the evolutionary reactors, and the advanced and future reactors. We are covering for sure the fuel and the fuel cycles associated with the different reactors, evolutionary reactors and future advanced reactors, including reprocessings and PAT for sure. We are covering waste and decommissioning. It's also very important to tackle this issue very properly. It's very important also from a public opinion perspective to continue to perform research, development, innovation, and to progress there and to show that there is progress still to be done on that field. And then there is a domain there, which is the number 4 on emerging energy systems, where we believe it's very important to start really to reflect in depth how the nuclear energy of the future can be better integrated into the electricity system of the future, which will be different. There will be a need for higher flexibility. There will be a need also to cope with more decentralization, with the increased role that renewables will play into the electricity system. So we need to reflect on that further. And we need to reflect also, as I said it before, beyond the electricity sector to other applications, and in particular the heat production. And then, not to be forgotten, the black box there at the end is just a small box there, but it's very important. The cross-cutting issues, talking about materials, talking about instrumentation and control, talking about robotics, talking about modelization and simulation, talking about virtual engineering, etc., etc. So all these are domains which also have to be looked at from a kind of horizontal perspective and which are cross-cutting over the 4 other categories which I mentioned before. Where do we stand today? So we are now running expert meetings to try to extract good ideas for the road mapping to the phase 2, which is in progress. All that will then be consolidated for the advisory panel somewhere in June. We might have a second run of expert meetings in September, October, maybe in a different format compared to the one that we have presently running. We have an advisory panel foreseen in November, and then we'll go to a final workshop somewhere at the beginning of next year, March, April next year. Maybe, by the way, in the UK. This is still to be confirmed. And at the end of that, we should have on the table for the member countries of the NEA and the stakeholders some material to be further discussed and to see where cooperation, international cooperation, might be the most effective way for the implementation. Thank you.
Okay, then we will lead on with Régis Nhili at EDF. Régis is director of the Materials Aging Institute. So this leads into, I think, a very interesting topic. First of all, Materials Aging Institute is by nature an international corporation. Second, we are tapping into a topic which is not only new reactors, but also innovation to make the current fleet operate longer. So Régis, would be interesting to hear your perspective on that. And obviously materials, new materials is probably one of the cross-cutting technologies which make possible new reactor concepts and is therefore very important. Régis.
Merci, merci Marcus. En fait, je vais surtout parler des réacteurs existants. On a beaucoup parlé jusqu'à présent des nouveaux réacteurs. Moi, je vais vous donner un petit peu la vision du producteur nucléaire, de l'exploitant, en termes de durée de fonctionnement et quelle recherche et quelle innovation est nécessaire pour pouvoir justifier de la prolongation de durée de fonctionnement des réacteurs nucléaires en toute sûreté et en accroissant également la performance des tranches. Alors, en termes de contexte sur la durée de fonctionnement que vous connaissez, quand même, je vais revenir sur quelques éléments. En termes d'enjeux, déjà, la prolongation de durée de fonctionnement, c'est un enjeu majeur. Vous avez entendu parler du grand carénage côté EDF, mais on a de nombreux exploitants à l'échelle internationale qui souhaitent pouvoir prolonger la durée de fonctionnement de leur centrale. Il y a un enjeu aussi par rapport à l'aspect disponibilité des tranches, ma présentation va se focaliser sur les mécanismes de vieillissement des matériaux et des principaux composants des centrales nucléaires. Il faut savoir qu'il y a quand même pas mal d'impacts dus à des problèmes de vieillissement des matériaux qui ont des conséquences importantes sur les centrales. Donc c'est un élément clé et majeur qui peut avoir un impact sur la disponibilité, mais aussi sur la radioprotection, notamment je dirais, la contamination du circuit primaire. Donc on va chercher à réduire ces phénomènes-là, et également potentiellement des impacts sur l'environnement, par exemple quand on fait des nettoyages chimiques des générateurs de vapeur. Donc il y a des enjeux importants autour de la durée de fonctionnement et la maîtrise et le management du vieillissement des principaux composants et des matériaux dont ils sont faits. Pour l'exploitant, les attentes de l'exploitant pour manager ce vieillissement, c'est d'abord pouvoir, si possible, optimiser l'exploitation et la maintenance des tranches, qui va permettre de réduire les sollicitations sur les principaux composants et pouvoir prolonger leur durée de fonctionnement. On peut penser par exemple aux plans de chargement faible fluence qui vont permettre de réduire la fluence de la cuve et donc de gagner des marges par rapport à ce qu'on avait pu avoir en conception. L'exploitant va aussi se poser des questions, notamment en termes de surveillance et d'inspection de ces composants. Notamment, plus on va aller accroître la durée de fonctionnement des composants qu'on ne peut pas remplacer, comme la cuve du réacteur ou l'enceinte de confinement, on va avoir besoin de techniques de surveillance et d'inspection plus performantes, et peut-être qu'on va devoir accroître la périodicité des inspections ou augmenter l'emplacement des inspections. Et donc l'exploitant a besoin d'un appui par rapport à ces éléments-là. Et puis, en dernier recours, l'exploitant peut être amené, bien évidemment, à remplacer certains composants. Et quand on a un parc important, comme EDF de 58 réacteurs, on veut éviter de devoir remplacer les mêmes composants simultanément sur de nombreuses tranches. Donc, il faut aussi pouvoir planifier tout ça. Et donc, le rôle de la R&D, en appui à ces besoins de l'exploitant, c'est de pouvoir innover et d'apporter des contributions, des connaissances scientifiques en sciences des matériaux et également en termes de contrôle non destructif sur l'inspection de ces composants. Donc, trois éléments clés. D'abord, la maîtrise, la connaissance du vieillissement des composants clés. Donc, on fait des examens, bien évidemment, en centrale, en laboratoire chaud. On va avoir aussi des moyens d'essai pour reproduire les phénomènes physiques qu'on a pu observer. Donc la première chose, c'est de comprendre et ensuite de pouvoir reproduire ces phénomènes-là grâce à la simulation numérique. D'accord ? Pour, in fine, pouvoir extrapoler et prédire la fin de vie de tel ou tel composant et permettre ensuite à l'exploitant de prendre des décisions en connaissance de cause et permettre d'optimiser un petit peu sa maintenance et son programme de remplacement. Donc c'est cet aspect connaissance du vieillissement des composants clés. Elle se fait d'abord sur bien sûr les composants critiques non remplaçables, la cuve et l'enceinte de confinement, mais elle va porter aussi également sur d'autres composants, gros composants en particulier qui sont remplaçables, et puis des sujets tels que la chimie, l'optimisation des circuits primaires et secondaires, et puis d'autres sujets comme par exemple les câbles. Il faut savoir qu'il y a beaucoup de câbles dans une centrale nucléaire, c'est très compliqué à remplacer. Et là, une des innovations, une des attentes de l'exploitant, c'est d'avoir une méthode de surveillance in situ, en service du vieillissement des câbles. Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, le critère, c'est un critère sur l'allongement à rupture des câbles pour savoir s'ils sont bons pour le service ou pas. Donc concrètement, il faut couper un tronçon de câble et aller faire des essais de traction en labo. Donc on voit bien que ça, c'est pas pratique du tout. Et l'objectif, c'est de pouvoir avoir une méthode de surveillance in situ à partir de caractérisation du vieillissement, caractérisation chimique, et de faire le lien vis-à-vis du critère d'allongement à rupture. Voilà, donc des travaux sur des méthodes de contrôle innovantes, des techniques de surveillance nouvelles ou des techniques de surveillance plus fiables, plus pratiques à mettre en œuvre et qui vont faire aussi gagner du temps, notamment sur les arrêts de tranche. Et puis on peut penser également à des procédés de réparation ou des nouveaux procédés de fabrication pour les composants que l'on doit remplacer. Voilà. Et ces travaux-là côté R&D, ils vont porter à la fois sur les câbles sur des polymères, ils vont porter également sur le béton, notamment sur l'enceinte de confinement, et puis sur les matériaux métalliques, bien évidemment, ça c'est le cœur de l'activité, avec des modélisations, des simulations numériques qui vont porter de la toute petite échelle. Pour bien comprendre les mécanismes de vieillissement, on a besoin de commencer vraiment quasiment à l'échelle de l'atome, pour comprendre un petit peu quels sont les dégâts, notamment d'irradiation, au niveau de la microstructure des matériaux, et puis de pouvoir remonter à l'échelle, jusqu'à l'échelle du composant. Donc voilà un petit peu les travaux de R&D tels qu'ils sont attendus par l'exploitant. Donc ça représente des efforts de recherche qui sont conséquents. Et donc par rapport à ça, l'initiative, puisqu'on arrive maintenant à l'aspect collaboration internationale, on voit bien qu'il y a des besoins de partager, de mutualiser ces efforts de recherche. Donc on parle de recherche industrielle et appliquée. Besoin de mutualiser les efforts pour avoir plus de données, pour pouvoir partager, confronter ces approches avec les meilleurs pairs à échelle internationale. Et donc maintenant, je vais vous parler du Material Staging Institute. Donc c'est une initiative de 3 exploitants ou représentants d'exploitants en 2008 par EDF, par l'EPRI, donc Electric Power Research Institute aux États-Unis, qui représente les exploitants américains et puis de nombreux exploitants dans le reste du monde également, et puis TEPCO. Donc l'idée, c'était de créer un institut de recherche, un centre d'excellence sur le vieillissement des matériaux, où les exploitants vont mettre en commun, décider en commun d'un programme de recherche. Et puis, ce qui est assez innovant, c'est de le réaliser en commun. C'est-à-dire que chaque partenaire va définir ses priorités, mais va aussi contribuer à la réalisation d'une partie du programme. Et donc, concrètement, on va avoir des programmes de recherche, des projets qui vont comprendre des lots ou des parties réalisées par plusieurs membres. Donc, une vraie approche collaborative. Donc sur la gauche, vous avez les membres pilotes, donc les exploitants ou représentants d'exploitants, donc EDF, l'EPRI, j'en ai parlé. On a également EDF Énergie pour le Royaume-Uni. On a Rosenergoatom pour la Russie. Donc les Russes, ils n'ont pas de PWR, de réacteur REP, mais ils ont des VVER. Donc ce n'est pas tout à fait le même design, ce n'est pas les mêmes matériaux. En revanche, il y a pas mal de synergies sur la compréhension des mécanismes de vieillissement. Quand on va parler de chimie, ils ont les mêmes problématiques d'optimisation de la chimie de leur circuit. Donc on a des travaux en commun, et puis ils vont nous apporter aussi leurs moyens expérimentaux de recherche. Et puis enfin, on a CGN pour la Chine, et puis Kansai pour le Japon. Voilà. Donc on regroupe, pas tous les pays, mais on regroupe des pays clés et des exploitants clés sur ces thématiques-là. Et puis, on a des membres associés, donc des industriels du domaine nucléaire, comme Mitsubishi ou Criepi côté Japon, avec TEPCO, et puis AREVA et le CEA, bien évidemment, côté France. Donc ça représente à peu près un programme de 11 millions d'euros par an de programmes de recherche réalisés en commun. Et puis, qui vient sous-tendre ce programme de recherche industrielle, on a un réseau scientifique qu'on appelle le MAI-SN pour Scientific Network, qui regroupe à peu près 25 universités de recherche à échelle mondiale, donc dans les pays où il y a des membres. Donc c'est principalement aux US avec Michigan University et puis le MIT, et puis après on a un peu au Japon, de nombreuses universités au Royaume-Uni et puis en France. Donc cette partie-là, elle est importante parce qu'elle nous permet de lancer des projets exploratoires, des projets un petit peu innovants, et nous permettre de bénéficier des dernières avancées au niveau de la communauté scientifique. Et ça nous permet d'utiliser des méthodes numériques, des nouvelles approches, et pour être sûr que notre programme de recherche, il utilise les meilleures approches scientifiques. Voilà, alors après, quelques points particuliers sur, je dirais, l'originalité du Material Staging Institute. Donc, bon, un centre d'excellence international, on a un programme de recherche, mais on a aussi un programme de education and training, de formation et de workshop, où l'objectif, c'est d'attirer chaque année les meilleurs experts, industriels ou scientifiques, pour partager sur des problématiques concrètes de recherche telles que définies par les exploitants. Donc l'approche collaborative, j'en ai parlé. Juste dire un mot sur le fait que bon, les exploitants, ils viennent aussi avec leurs centres de recherche nationaux ou d'autres partenaires industriels qui vont eux-mêmes aussi réaliser une partie du programme. Et ce qui est vraiment important, bon, je parle de durée de fonctionnement, donc on raisonne long terme, ça nécessite également des collaborations qui sont stratégiques sur le long terme. Et donc ça prend du temps d'apprendre à travailler ensemble avec de nouveaux acteurs. Et donc on le fait sur des durées d'au moins 5 ans, voire on vise plus que ça, au moins une dizaine d'années pour créer de la confiance et vraiment partager sur nos approches. Alors, bon, ça a été dit par Sylvestre tout à l'heure sur Astrid. Bon, là, on est une ampleur moindre, mais au niveau des exploitants, l'enjeu aussi, c'est de pouvoir partager des méthodes, des moyens donc expérimentaux, des facilities, des labos de recherche également, et des chercheurs. Donc on a des chercheurs détachés donc pour travailler ensemble. Ce matin, on parlait de plateau projet. On a des chercheurs qui vont venir du Japon, des États-Unis, travailler directement avec nous sur les mêmes projets. Et on réalise également, comme ça a été dit sur Astrid, des benchmarks d'outils et de méthodes. Alors ça, bien évidemment, c'est un moyen des fois de mutualiser des efforts, mais c'est aussi et surtout pour se confronter à nos pairs à échelle internationale, pour renforcer la confiance qu'on peut avoir dans nos méthodes et nos approches. Donc ça, c'est vraiment important pour chaque exploitant, mais c'est aussi important quand on va discuter avec l'autorité de sûreté nucléaire pour pouvoir dire, bah, écoutez, cette méthode-là, nous, on y a confiance, mais en fait, on n'est pas les seuls à avoir confiance dans cette approche. Alors, ce n'est pas parce que tout le monde va utiliser cette méthode que c'est la meilleure, mais c'est quand même un élément qui permet de réconforter et d'accroître la confiance dans nos approches. Donc ça, ce sont vraiment aussi des valeurs intangibles importantes qui sont non quantifiables directement, mais qui ont beaucoup de valeur pour nous. Et l'objectif est de pouvoir favoriser le consensus technique sur certains sujets. On n'y arrive pas sur tous, mais en tout cas, ce sont des débats riches et qui nous apportent. Sur l'innovation, on va dire plus technologique, on a commencé aussi à avoir des échanges sur les innovations qui peuvent être déployées au niveau des différents exploitants membres, avec l'objectif d'accroître la dissémination de cette innovation au sein de nos membres. Et puis là, bon, la connaissance fondamentale, j'en ai parlé, c'est vraiment pour accroître aussi notre crédibilité scientifique au niveau des travaux qu'on peut mener. Donc, voilà pour le MAI, qui est une approche un petit peu originale et puis qui maintenant arrive à maturité après 8 années. Et puis je vais prendre juste 1 minute pour parler, comme on parle de collaboration internationale, je ne peux pas, côté EDF, ne pas citer ce qu'on a réalisé en termes de R&D depuis maintenant une dizaine d'années. La R&D d'EDF, qui représente à peu près 2000 chercheurs en France, a créé des centres de recherche à l'international. Donc dans de nombreux pays, ça avait commencé il y a une douzaine d'années en Allemagne, mais on a maintenant des centres de recherche au Royaume-Uni, aux États-Unis, dans la Silicon Valley, en Chine, à Singapour, Pologne et Italie, je pense que j'en ai pas oublié. Et l'objectif de ces centres de recherche, ce sont des petites équipes, c'est de pouvoir collaborer avec l'écosystème local, donc collaborer avec la communauté scientifique, avec aussi les startups, les industriels locaux, sur l'innovation, sur la recherche scientifique, en appui de nos activités locales. On ne va pas aller s'implanter dans un pays si EDF n'a pas d'activité. Donc c'est pour vraiment être en appui de la performance des activités locales, de nos filiales localement, mais c'est aussi en bénéficiant de tout ce qui se passe dans ces écosystèmes, de pouvoir aussi identifier, détecter l'innovation où elle est dans le monde pour le bénéfice du groupe. Et ces centres de recherche, ils ont aussi vocation à héberger quelques compétences clés où ils vont être les leaders pour le reste du groupe. Donc ça crée un bon maillage à échelle internationale et ça nous permet de vraiment détecter localement ce qui se passe plutôt qu'en restant en France ou dans un autre pays. Voilà.
Thank you, Régis. So we have, I wanted to say we have a couple of minutes left. It's actually 2 minutes left. So please.
Thank you very much. Merci, Markus. Myrto Tripathi, EPR Director for AREVA. I was very happy to hear our friends from NNL, NEA, and the DOE to mention how nuclear energy would be so important in the low-carbon future that is so greatly needed. However, the COP21 last year was held in Paris, and hence I have two questions. The first one is, how do you explain, what is your feeling about the fact that nuclear energy was not discussed during the climate negotiations, first of all? And second of all, to our French colleagues here on the podium, what is your own, as French people, feeling about it, and what do you intend to do about it? Thank you.
So who wants to start? John.
Well, I wasn't at COP21, but I'm pretty sure that the U.S. came out strongly making the connection between carbon emission reduction and nuclear power. It may have been at a side event, it may have not been in the delegate discussion, but there was a booth, we featured nuclear, so we're continuing that push forward. And I think if you look at the U.S. Government policies, they've been evolving over the last 4 or 5 years. The president continues to mention nuclear as part of the solution, and now we have more regulation coming in on carbon emissions, which are consistent with our 80% reduction by 2050, and all these come together, and I think everyone has concluded that nuclear needs to be part of the solution. It's really this balancing then of the portfolio.
Any other?
Well, as a representative of a state-owned company, I shall not comment the place that was made to nuclear energy in COP21. But there are things that I can see, which are the facts, and how our nuclear programs, on R&D program, ASTRID program, are supported by the government in France nowadays. And I think that that is the most important thing.
Ce fait que, avant de travailler à l'AEN, j'ai travaillé pendant 23 ans à la Commission européenne. Et donc, un des problèmes du nucléaire en Europe, c'est que l'Europe, la plupart des pays européens, alors la Grande-Bretagne est l'exception un peu aujourd'hui, et peut-être la Pologne un peu aussi, et certains de nos amis des pays de l'Est européen, mais sinon le problème c'est qu'au niveau européen, l'Europe a le nucléaire honteux. Hein. Et donc voilà. Et donc c'est vrai qu'un peu plus de responsabilité politique, quand on a des grands engagements et des grandes perspectives, on peut évidemment attendre qu'il y ait une responsabilité politique qui soit logiquement associée à ces déclarations. Bon, il fait que je suis belge, alors là je m'adresse à vous tout à fait personnellement, là ça dit tout à fait personnel, mais c'est vrai que quand on voit la loi de transition énergétique française, je ne suis pas français, je suis belge, j'ai assisté à l'Indeps Review de l'AIE en octobre l'année passée de la France. Descendre à 50% d'électricité nucléaire en 2025, c'est pas possible. Alors il faut être sérieux, c'est pas possible. Bon, que l'on ait cet objectif, que l'on ait cette perspective sur le plus long terme, ça c'est un choix politique et ça se discute pas. Et on peut très bien se mettre ça comme perspective à plus long terme, pourquoi pas. Donc ça c'est pas à discuter. Mais ceci dit, défendre ou espérer arriver à ce 50% en 2025, c'est simplement pas possible. Donc quelque part, c'est de l'irresponsabilité politique de mentionner ça. À titre tout à fait personnel que je m'adresse ici.
Question here.
If I look at the scene, sequestration does not work. There is nothing done today on sequestration in Europe, everywhere almost. Big storage of electricity, it's not on site. And 30, 35 years is very short. When I listen at you, for instance, at the DOE program, I have the feeling there is absolutely no choice made, really. In fact, I have the feeling you are not ready to do, but you just want to keep the competence on all subjects. And I have not the feeling it's a way to progress at a speed which leads to 80% less CO2 in 35 years. So I'm not very optimistic about that. And so I would like really to understand how we can change that. For instance, if you look at small reactors, looking at United States, 700 terawatt per hour, it's between 500 and 2,000 reactors, depending on the power. It's huge. You cannot do that in 20 years or 25 years. So I really don't understand where is really the will to do something.
Well, I think we've gotten into the situation where the timeline for developing new nuclears become, or viewed to be very long, and that's part of the problem that we need to work. And this whole idea of innovation in the conference also has to deal with how we come up with more innovative ways of doing business. This means trying to find, it's not just about technology development, it's about how we do the testing, how we bring in modeling and simulation to really accelerate the progress we make on this. The build rate that we show is within the historical number, so it's not, it's only 4 gigawatts, 4 gigawatts a year in the US. That certainly is actually less than what we have done historically. Can we do it at that same speed today? I don't know. That's a good question. You know, the experience we're getting right now in the 4 new builds is going to be very valuable, and the reports from the utilities, the Southern Company, is that the number 2 units are going much faster, on schedule, under budget, all the kinds of things that we hope to have. The first of a kind are always a little bit problematic. But finding new ways of doing business is going to be important, and bringing the regulator along is also, I think, critically important, because we don't want the regulatory process to take a significant part of the time that's needed to deploy new technology.
Yeah, we've also made the analysis based on the curves which I've shown of what it would mean in terms of the rate of putting reactors online between now and 2050, according to the 2DS scenario which I mentioned. So going from 400 gigawatt worldwide, 400 gigawatt today to 930 gigawatt 2050, so doubling the capacity. Basically, the 400 gigawatt of today will be more or less shut down in 2050, except if you go to 80 years lifetime extension, okay, maybe, but basically all these reactors, most of these reactors of today will be shut down. So this means building about 700, 800 gigawatt between now and 2050. That's a rate which, as it was mentioned by John, has been done in the past. So it has been done. Now, for sure, you need to have the conditions to be able to get back again to that rate of production. Basically, again, to look to the historical evolution, we would need to have something like 10, 12 reactors put online every year between the present decade, going to doubling it to something like 20, 25 reactors to put online every year in the next decade, if you want to get to that point at the end. Again, today, there are 70 reactors in construction in the world. Most of them, for sure, a large number of them in Asia and in China in particular. 70 reactors in construction. If you basically assume that these reactors are built within 6-7 years, which should be the normal time frame for that, you reach already presently with that number the 10 reactors per year to be put online. So that rate of construction today is not too bad already in function of that perspective. All the question is, will we be able to increase it and to maintaining on the longer term? That's an open question. Depends to regulatory aspects, to competitiveness, to the cost of it, etc., etc., etc. For sure.
We had a question, yeah.
Merci. Je voulais revenir à la question de notre collègue d'AREVA. Je ne commenterai pas non plus, comme M. Pivet, la position française. On remarque quand même qu'il y a une différence entre les politiques nucléaires en Europe et les affirmations des politiques sur le nucléaire. Et mis à part la Grande-Bretagne, et je dirais peut-être aussi la Finlande, la plupart des États européens, même ceux qui ont des programmes nucléaires, sont relativement discrets, on va dire, et ont le nucléaire honteux, comme M. Deffrennes l'a dit. Et c'est assez grave, parce que d'une part, ça ne reflète pas leur opinion publique. Mais même dans certains pays d'Europe de l'Est, en effet, il y a maintenant, les gouvernements ne parlent plus notamment en Hongrie, en Slovaquie, les gouvernements sont beaucoup plus discrets ces derniers temps sur leur programme nucléaire. Enfin, c'est ce que me disent, moi, les gens avec qui je travaille à Foratom. C'est grave parce que ça influe l'opinion publique, c'est-à-dire que les positions des politiques ont de l'importance sur la publique acceptance, mais à l'heure actuelle, dans beaucoup de pays, il y a ce terrorisme intellectuel qui s'est appliqué sur les élites politiques. Elle ne reflète pas l'opinion publique. Enfin, en tout cas, en France, ce n'est pas le cas. Voilà, c'est juste un commentaire qui n'est pas une question.
Any other questions from the room?
Let me just make a comment, because
Yep.
I think there was that kind of attitude in the US several years ago, but there's been several things that have happened that have turned that around. One is that the environmental groups, the ones that do serious science, recognize that climate change is a much bigger problem than nuclear waste disposal or nuclear power, risk of nuclear power. And if you put these all on the same scale, you can see the vast difference in terms of cost to the human race. I think so that's been important. So that voice has spoken up in the U.S., the environmental groups. I think the other thing is that the people that made their fortunes in silicon and software are now seeing this climate issue as very important. They've become very outspoken. So Bill Gates will actually, visit the White House and talk to our president about this and how important this is. So it's really that private sector and influential private sector individuals, and they're willing to put their money behind it, have really made a difference in terms of nuclear's acceptance within this administration, hopefully throughout the US.
Actually, what you're saying is very interesting, and maybe that leads to a point where I think we need, as an industry, probably to make sure that we don't wrongly interpret the facts and we take enough step back to see actually the bigger picture. I would be cautious to say that, obviously we would all wish that politics would take a stronger lead on certain topics, especially on nuclear, that's clear. If they take the position that they take, there is a reason behind it. Do we fully understand it? I don't know. Clearly, what is interesting in the US and what John just mentioned is there is an interest of the private sector, which is non-nuclear, which goes to the White House and says, we need that. And those are influential people. We don't have that today in Europe. We don't have non-nuclear sector, let's say, industry groups which would take an influence on the European Union or on individual governments. I think. And then we have to ask the question, okay, what do we need in order to get there? So unfortunately, it's a very interesting discussion, but I don't want to keep you longer than we planned to. But please.
Maybe just a remark. First, I want to recall that a very small country, some years ago, was able to build 6 reactors per year. That was our country. So year 25 is not very big, from my point of view. The second point is when I'm looking at what happened in the world, listening at Europe, there has been a study a month ago about the Europe of energy. And what is the answer of Europe? It's gas. The second thing, when I'm listening to Mr. Obama, the answer is gas plus, even if he cite nuclear. But obviously, there is really something very wrong about climate challenge, all that. It's all the world is going toward gas today, in fact. And I think that will be a bad surprise in a few years' time. So it's quite amazing how we are not ambitious about this matter of developing nuclear energy.
The question maybe to come back to what I just said, I think the question is, are we the ones, I mean, we certainly have a role to lead, but we need to make sure that the ambition is a joint ambition. It cannot come only from the nuclear industry sector. I think we have seen that a couple of times. I mean, since, when did I join AREVA? 2007. There is no, well, prognostic on the development of nuclear that we exceeded. It was, everything basically was lower over the years than we expected. So I think the problem is probably not even so much the ambition. We have ambition. The problem is, are we able to execute that ambition, and what support do we have? How can we generate a favorable supporting tissue? People who are speaking, I mean, I think probably one of the most interesting things at the COP21 was when, I think it was 3 environmental scientists who spoke up. I mean, they were not motivated by the nuclear industry to do that. They just spoke up out of their own interest and made a statement about nuclear. I think this is the kind of awareness that we need. I mean, in this case, we didn't play a role, I think, but maybe this is the kind we need more of that, and this creates also momentum that can be leveraged in order to realize, to get financing, for example. I mean, if you look at H2020, the European program, especially on nuclear fission, it's I'm sorry, it's a joke. It's there's nothing. This is compared to other means.
And then, if you allow me, there is also one thing which raised to my mind, which was not discussed here, but which is also to put into the picture of this discussion. I will not elaborate much on that. Particularly in Europe, is the impact and the effect of the liberalization, or the so-called liberalization of the electricity sector, which has completely disturbed the process and the policy making in the energy sector. And what is quite interesting to me is that this process of liberalization has been launched in the early 1990s, very much pushed by the UK. And it's quite interesting to see that the first country in Europe who is now reflecting on that and has launched the energy market reform is the UK also. So that's a quite interesting issue.
Well, I see that you're all very comfortable sitting here, but there is also some drinks waiting outside. Valérie made sure that I tell you that. The official program is over. If anyone wants to stay and continue discussing, I mean, we're available.